The galaxy was an ocean of stars, filled with countless civilizations, each proud of their own power and history. For thousands of years, empires rose and fell, fighting endless wars over territory, resources, and pride. Some races were known for their wisdom, some for their cruelty, and some for their arrogance. Among them stood one of the most feared empires of the age, the Krell Dominion. The Krell were conquerors by blood. Their ships blotted out suns when they arrived in foreign skies. Their warriors marched without mercy, leaving silence where once life had thrived. Worlds burned, fleets shattered, and rulers knelt. For centuries, no one had been able to resist their might. To the Krell, domination was not just ambition, it was destiny. But even the mighty Krell had heard whispers about a place at the edge of the spiral arm, a region marked with warning signs on every star map. There, around a yellow sun, lay a small world of oceans and continents. A world that outsiders spoke of with unease. A world called Earth. The Galactic Council, though divided in politics, was united in one thing: no one should provoke humanity. In countless meetings, the same words were repeated like a chant. Stay away from Earth's region. Do not trespass into human space. To outsiders, it sounded strange. Humanity was young compared to ancient empires. They had only recently joined the stars, yet every race spoke of them with a mixture of respect and fear. Why? No clear reason was given. The warnings were wrapped in silence, as though speaking too much of Earth was dangerous in itself. When the Council passed its resolutions, the Krell Overlord had laughed. He stood in his war chamber surrounded by generals, banners, and trophies of fallen worlds. His scaled lips curved in scorn. Stay away from humans, he repeated. Do they think we are children afraid of ghost stories? The Council has grown weak, trembling before a race barely out of its cradle. We are Krell. The stars bow before us, and we will bow before no one. His words sparked cheers among his generals. To them, the warning was nothing but a challenge. In their pride, they believed the galaxy had created a myth of humanity only to protect them. They believed the Council exaggerated human strength because it feared rebellion against its authority. So the decision was made. The Dominion would move against Earth. They would march their fleets into the Forbidden Region and tear down the so-called Defenders of Sol. And when Earth burned, the Krell would stand taller than ever, their banners visible to every corner of the galaxy. Still, there were voices of doubt among the Krell. A few scholars spoke softly in private halls. The Council is not known for fear without reason, they whispered. Perhaps humanity is not what we think. Perhaps. But their voices were drowned by the roar of war drums. The Krell did not listen. They had never listened. And so they prepared their Grand Armada, a force larger than the fleets they had used to destroy whole coalitions of worlds. When the first ships moved toward human space, a ripple of unease spread through the galaxy. Traders, diplomats, and wanderers all shook their heads. Some pitied the Krell, some simply waited, eager to see the outcome, and some prayed silently for the humans, though deep in their hearts they knew it was not the humans who needed prayer. For the humans had given only one warning, spoken in a calm, heavy voice across the stars. Do not come closer. This is your only warning. And now, with the Krell marching forward, the galaxy would learn whether that warning was empty words or an unshakable truth. The Krell Armada moved like a storm. Their warships were vast, armored beasts of metal and fire. Each one carried weapons strong enough to break a continent, and together they looked unstoppable. When they entered the dark edges of human space, their banners of war glowed proudly against the stars. To the Krell, this was nothing more than another campaign. They had done it many times before: arrive, crush, conquer, enslave. The commanders laughed in their chambers, already planning how they would divide Earth's lands and oceans. The Overlord himself promised to place his throne on human soil. But, as their ships advanced, something strange happened. Space itself felt heavy, as if unseen eyes were watching. The Krell crews grew restless, though no enemy had yet appeared. The navigators whispered that the stars around them seemed too quiet, too still. Yet their commanders mocked them. Do not tremble at shadows, they barked. Humans are nothing before us. And then, It came. A voice. Not through ordinary channels, not through broken static, but across every frequency at once. Calm, steady, without anger. Only warning. Turn back. This is your only warning. The Krell command deck filled with laughter. To them, the message was proof of human weakness. They fear us, said General Kor, slamming his claw against the table. Hear how they beg us to retreat. Soon they will kneel. But not all were so certain. A junior officer, young and unscarred, trembled as he replayed the transmission. There was no begging in that human voice, no sign of panic. It was steady like a stone in a raging river. Perhaps, he whispered, this is not fear. Perhaps it is certainty. His words were ignored. The Overlord gave his order, advance. The Krell Armada pressed deeper into the Sol region. On their scanners, shapes began to appear. At first, they looked like shadows moving at the edge of vision, distant blurs against the void. Then slowly, they came into focus. Human ships. But they were not like the Krell expected. The Dominion had imagined crude vessels, clumsy metal shells barely held together. Instead, what they saw were sleek predators of the dark, black hulls, absorbing the light of nearby stars. Their engines burned cold and sharp, their weapons arrays hidden but ready. They did not rush. They did not boast. They simply waited. A strange silence filled the Krell decks. The arrogance that had burned so bright began to flicker. The human fleet did not look weak. It looked patient, like a hunter waiting for prey to step closer. Are they challenging us? One Krell officer asked in disbelief. They dare, the Overlord roared. Destroy them. Show the galaxy that the Dominion fears nothing. The order was given. Krell weapons lit up the darkness. Plasma storms surged forward. Beams of fire streaked across the void, and thousands of missiles cut paths like falling stars. The sky itself seemed to break apart under the fury of the Dominion's first strike. When the light faded, the Krell expected to see wreckage. Instead, their laughter froze. The human fleet still stood. Their armor shimmered, their shields bent but unbroken, silent and unshaken. They remained in formation as if the storm had been nothing more than rain against a mountain. On the Krell ships, fear began to stir. It was small at first, hidden beneath denial, but it grew stronger as the realization sank. And these were not farmers defending their homes with scrap metal. These were warriors who had built their ships for this very moment, and then humanity answered. The first human volleys tore through the void with a precision that felt unreal. They did not waste fire. Each strike landed exactly where it was meant to, cutting through Krell shields and splitting open their proud warships. Commanders screamed as their vessels cracked apart, flames spilling into space. The Dominion had unleashed its storm, and now it faced one greater than any it had ever known. The galaxy watched in silence. The Krell had ignored the warning, and now the reckoning had begun. The Krell Armada, once filled with arrogance, now faced something it had never known before: resistance that did not break. Their first attack had been a storm meant to crush the humans in one wave. But when the light cleared, the human fleet was still standing, silent, waiting. The Krell Overlord roared in rage. His command deck trembled as he slammed his claws against the war table. Again, he shouted. Increase the fire. Break them. The order rippled across the Dominion fleet. Cannons lit up once more, missiles streaked across the dark, and the void turned into fire and thunder. To any outsider, it looked like the heavens themselves were exploding. Yet again, the humans endured. Their ships moved with terrifying discipline. They shifted formations like dancers, absorbing attacks, shields glowing but never failing. The black hulls seemed alive, bending the storm away. Where Krell fire was wild and furious, human defense was calm and precise. Inside the Krell vessels, fear began to crawl into the hearts of even seasoned commanders. They had faced countless enemies before, but none had ever stood so silently against the Dominion's might. It was not just defiance, it was certainty. As if the humans already knew how this battle would end. Then the humans moved. With a single silent command, their fleet advanced. Engines flared blue, their formation tightening into a spear. For the first time, the Krell saw them not as prey, but as hunters. The first human volleys struck like lightning. They did not waste firepower. Every shot found its mark. A Dominion. Cruiser split open in two, its core exploding into a ball of fire. Another dreadnought, proud and massive, was pierced straight through its heart, its shields shattering like glass. The Krell screamed across their comms, desperate to regroup, but every attempt was cut down. The humans did not fire in chaos, they fired with intent. It was as if they could see the weaknesses in every Krell ship, striking only where it mattered most. One by one, the Dominion's proud warships fell. Inside the Overlord's flagship, silence grew heavy. His generals stared in disbelief as more red markers blinked out from their tactical display. "Impossible," one whispered. They are cutting through us as if they knew us better than you." "We know ourselves," the Overlord snarled. "Do not lose heart. We are Krell. Forward. Crush them by sheer force." But even his voice could not erase the truth. His armada was crumbling. For the first time, the galaxy saw the Krell bleed. In the far reaches of space, other races watched the battle unfold through hidden sensors and secret relays. Traders, smugglers, and spies carried whispers to every world. The impossible was happening. The unstoppable Dominion was being broken, and by those the Council had once warned about. On Earth itself, humanity did not cheer. They did not send broadcasts of triumph. They watched with steady eyes as their fleets carried out the grim task. There was no joy in this fight, only necessity. For the humans had always known. One day, Arrogance would bring someone to their doorstep. And when that day came, they had to be ready. The Krell had thought humans weak because they were quiet. They had mistaken silence for fear. But silence had only been patience, preparation, the quiet of a storm gathering strength. Now that storm was here. As the battle raged on, the humans pressed their advantage. Their fleet split the Dominion's formation, driving wedges into their lines, isolating groups of ships, and destroying them one by one. No mercy, no hesitation, only precision and power. The Krell had marched forward with pride, but pride was not armor. Pride was not a shield. And as their banners burned in the void, they finally began to understand the meaning of the Council's warning. The humans had not spoken out of fear. They had spoken out of truth. And now, with every shattered warship drifting in silence, the Krell were learning that truth the hard way. The battle had turned into a nightmare for the Krell Dominion. What began as a proud march of conquest was now a slow drowning in fire and silence. Their armada, once called invincible, was being torn apart, piece by piece. The humans did not rush. They did not scream in victory. Their ships advanced like hunters, their strikes sharp and merciless. Every shot that left a human cannon found its place, cutting shields, ripping armor, silencing warships that had once terrorized half the galaxy. On board a Krell cruiser, alarms wailed as fire spread across the decks. Crew members scrambled, their voices filled with fear. Shields collapsing, hull breach on multiple levels. The captain, who had once believed the humans to be nothing but prey, now stared at the dark shapes of human ships closing in. How can they be so precise? He whispered, just before the final strike split his vessel in two. All across the battlefield, similar cries filled the Dominion's channels. Ships begged for reinforcements, but none came. Fleets tried to regroup, but each movement was predicted, countered, and destroyed. It was as if the humans could read their every thought. The Overlord sat on his throne aboard the flagship, his claws digging into the armrests. His golden eyes blazed with fury, but even fury could not hide the truth flashing red across the tactical displays. Dozens of Krell ships gone, hundreds crippled. The tide was not turning, it had already turned. This cannot be, he growled. We are Krell, we cannot be broken. But his generals said nothing. They knew. They could see it in the precision of human strikes, in the cold silence of their formation. The humans were not fighting to prove themselves. They were fighting to end this battle quickly, decisively, completely. The galaxy had always whispered about Earth, about the warnings that echoed in every council chamber. Now those whispers were taking shape before every watching eye. The humans were not legends. They were real, and their strength was far greater than the Dominion's pride. One after another, the Dominion's dreadnoughts fell. The largest of them, a behemoth named Bloodfire, was surrounded by 3 human warships. It fired every weapon it had, plasma storms blazing across the void. But the humans endured, their shields holding, their formation unbroken. Then, with terrifying precision, they struck. 3 lances of fire pierced the dreadnought's core, and within moments the Bloodfire exploded, its wreckage scattering like ashes into the stars. The Krell who witnessed it felt their courage collapse. If their strongest ship could fall so easily, what hope was left? Still the Overlord refused to accept defeat. "Rally the fleet," he bellowed. "We are not beaten yet." His words rang hollow. His voice was iron, but his fleet was ash. Meanwhile, the humans pressed forward. Their silence was more terrifying than any battle cry. No insults, no threats, no boasts, only action. Their discipline, their unity, their calm. These were weapons sharper than blades. For centuries, the Krell had conquered by fear. But now they knew what fear truly felt like. It was the sight of human ships advancing without hesitation. It was the knowledge that no strategy, no strength, no pride could stand against them. The Dominion's war banners, once symbols of terror, now floated as burning debris in the void. The galaxy, watching from afar, would never forget the sight. The mighty Krell Armada, shattered like glass against the unyielding wall of humanity. The battle that was meant to crown the Krell with ultimate glory had instead marked their greatest shame. And the humans, they did not even celebrate. To them, this was not triumph. This was defense. This was survival. The warning had been given. It had been ignored. And now the price was being paid in fire and ruin. The shattering was complete. The battle was over. The void that had once burned with plasma storms and shattering hulls was now silent. Wreckage drifted across the darkness. Broken ships, shattered banners, and fragments of what had once been the proud Krell Armada. Fires burned weakly in the distance, like dying stars, as the screams of war faded into emptiness. For the first time in centuries, the Krell Dominion knew defeat. Not just a defeat of numbers, not just the loss of ships, but the crushing of pride. Their invincible fleet, their unstoppable armada, had been reduced to scraps floating in the cold void. Among the wreckage, only a few Krell ships remained. Their hulls cracked, their engines failing, they limped away into the darkness. These survivors carried no victory. They carried a message, one that would spread across the stars faster than any fleet. Do not enter Earth's region. Do not test humanity. On the human side, their fleet held position, silent, calm, steady. They did not chase the broken survivors. They did not strike the crippled ships to finish the slaughter. Humanity had made its point. There was no need for cruelty. Inside their vessels, the human commanders watched the battlefield with heavy hearts. No cheers rose, no celebrations rang through the comms. Victory had come, but it carried no joy. For the humans, war was never a song of triumph. It was a necessity, a burden. They had fought because they had been forced to fight. Admiral Rains, commander of the human defense fleet, stood at the window of his flagship. His eyes were cold, but his voice was heavy. "They were warned," he said quietly. "And still they came." His officers nodded in silence. They too understood. Humanity had not wanted this battle. The warning had been given clearly, with patience and restraint. But Arrogance had brought the Krell into Sol's region, and Arrogance had broken them. On Earth, the people watched the reports with quiet resolve. Families gathered, children held close. eyes fixed on the stars where their defenders had stood. Relief washed through every city and colony, but it was mixed with sorrow. For even though humanity had not lost, they knew this was only the beginning. There would always be those who tested them, who mistook silence for weakness. But tonight the stars themselves bore witness. The silence after the battle was heavy, almost sacred. Every drifting wreckage told the same story. Pride can be shattered, warnings can be ignored, and consequences cannot be escaped. In the far reaches of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. Merchants carried tales, spies carried reports, and the ITO, truth grew louder with every passing hour. The Krell Dominion, once feared across 1,000 worlds, had been humbled. Their great armada had fallen, not to trickery, not to deception, but to strength, precision, and patience. Empires that had once doubted the Council's warnings now fell silent. Rulers who had mocked humanity in their courts now held their tongues. The message was clear, etched into the void with fire and ruin. Earth was not to be crossed. Back in the command chambers of the Krell, the Overlord listened to the reports in bitter silence. His throne room, once filled with songs of conquest, now echoed with shame. His armada was gone, his pride broken. He had thought himself a god among stars, but now he knew humanity was the wall his empire could not break. And yet, the humans themselves did not boast. They sent no transmissions of dominance, demanded no tribute, claimed no conquered territory. Their ships simply turned and disappeared back into the black, returning to their silent watch. It was as if they were saying to the galaxy, "We do not seek war, but if war comes, we will end it." The silence after the battle spoke louder than any words. The Krell had thought themselves immortal, but now they drifted as ashes. Humanity remained, quiet and unbroken, their region secure. And so, in the halls of power across the stars, leaders remembered the warning with new weight. Stay away from Earth's region. Those who ignored it would learn what the Krell had learned. That silence was not weakness, that patience was not fear, and that humanity's calm voice carried a storm behind it. The Krell Dominion had never known silence like this. Their fleets had once filled the stars with thunder and fire, their victories celebrated with endless roars. But now, in the aftermath of Earth's defense, silence wrapped around their empire like a chain. Their banners still flew, but they no longer carried the same weight. The Overlord sat in his grand chamber, surrounded by broken pride. His throne of iron and bone looked smaller now, and even his generals avoided his gaze. Reports arrived one after another. Lists of shattered ships, names of fallen captains, losses too great to count. The Dominion had not just been defeated, it had been humbled. At first the Overlord raged. He slammed his claws against the war table, his voice shaking the chamber. "We are Krell. We do not bow. We will rebuild and return." His words echoed like fire in his hall. But deep inside, he knew the truth. The humans had not won by chance. They had won by strength. Returning would only mean more humiliation, more broken fleets drifting in the void. In the lower ranks of the Dominion, soldiers and citizens whispered to each other in hushed voices. They no longer spoke of conquest with pride. Instead, they spoke of fear. Fear of the dark ships that had stood against them. Fear of the calm voice that had warned them once and then delivered ruin. Even among the proud Krell, the word human became a weight. Across the galaxy, the story spread like fire in dry grass. Merchants carried it across trade routes, smugglers shared it in hidden dens, and diplomats whispered it in the halls of kings. Every retelling carried the same lesson. Humanity had spoken the truth. Their warning had not been arrogance, it had been mercy. Other empires took note. The Vial, who once mocked humans as primitive children, withdrew their scouts from Sol's borders. The proud Arcan warlords, who had considered expanding toward Earth, quietly changed their plans. Even the neutral council members who had once debated endlessly now spoke with certainty. No one would dare challenge humanity again, and yet humanity themselves did not celebrate. Their fleets returned home, their ships hidden once more in the dark, watching silently. No banners were raised, no monuments carved in stone. The victory was not treated as a triumph, but as a burden. For humans, new war was never glorious. It was only sorrow, only necessity. Admiral Rains stood aboard his flagship, looking down at Earth from orbit. The blue oceans and green lands spun below him, calm and beautiful. His officers asked if he felt proud. He shook his head. "This was not pride," he said softly. "This was survival. They forced us to show our strength, and now the galaxy knows it. But we will not turn this into conquest. We are not like them." His words became the quiet truth of humanity. They would not seek empires, they would not demand tribute or enslave worlds. They wanted only peace, but peace had to be defended. And if threatened, they would fight, not with half measures, not with hesitation, but with everything. The lesson of the battle was clear. Silence does not mean weakness. Patience does not mean fear. Humanity's calm warning had been a promise, and they had kept it. For the Krell, the lesson was written in fire and wreckage. Their arrogance had blinded them, and their pride had shattered against the walls of Earth's defenders. They had thought themselves eternal, but eternity had ended the moment they crossed into Sol. And for the galaxy, the lesson would never be forgotten. In every council, in every throne room, in every hushed meeting of rulers, the same truth was spoken again and again. They were warned. They did not listen. And now their armadas are gone. The galaxy understood at last. Earth was not a world to conquer. It was a world to respect, a world to leave in peace, and humanity. Humanity returned to silence, watching, waiting, preparing. Because they knew someday someone else would forget the lesson. The stars held their silence long after the Krell fleets had fallen. Where once the void had burned with the fire of war, now only wreckage drifted. Broken hulls spun slowly in the endless dark. Reminders of arrogance turned into ashes. The galaxy watched, and the galaxy remembered. The Krell dominion, once feared across thousands of worlds, no longer spoke of glory. Their armadas were gone, their pride shattered, their name forever marked by failure. In their cities, murals of conquest were quietly taken down, replaced by shadows of shame. Children whispered about the humans in fear, and soldiers no longer boasted of victory. Instead, they muttered of black ships that moved like predators in the night. The Overlord himself never fully recovered. Though he still sat upon his throne, though his voice still carried authority, the fire in his eyes had dimmed. His advisors spoke carefully, his generals bowed without confidence, and his empire lived under the weight of silence. Every time he looked toward the stars, he saw not the endless prey he once believed in, but the memory of a single word: warning. Across the galaxy, the tale of Earth spread further. From the shining halls of the council to the hidden dens of smugglers, from merchants on distant routes to kings in golden palaces, all repeated the same words. They were warned. They did not listen. Now their armadas are gone. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy trembled not before the Krell, but before humanity. And yet, humanity did not demand tribute. They did not march armies across foreign worlds. They did not carve monuments to their strength. Instead, they returned home. On Earth, families embraced their loved ones, knowing their defenders had stood strong. Cities lit their skies with quiet lights of remembrance, not of celebration. There were no parades, no grand speeches of conquest. Humanity knew too well the cost of war. They carried not pride, but sorrow. The sorrow of lives lost, even among their enemies. Admiral Rains stood once more at the viewing window of his flagship. Earth glowed beneath him, a fragile jewel in the dark. His officers asked him, "What now? Will the galaxy fear us forever?" He shook his head slowly. "Let them remember. Let them respect our warning. But fear is not what we seek. We want only peace, and peace is what we will protect." His words became a quiet oath carried across the human fleets. Humanity did not rise to rule the galaxy. Humanity rose to defend itself, to guard its home, to ensure that no empire's pride would ever again threaten the blue and green world spinning beneath its sun. The lesson was clear for all. Silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender, and warnings should not be ignored. Behind humanity's calm voice was a storm strong enough to shatter armadas. And so the borders of Earth's region became sacred. No empire dared cross the line. No warlord marched his fleets into Sol. Even the boldest rulers lowered their banners when their scouts drew near that quiet part of the galaxy. For in the silence of that space, every drifting memory of the Krell's defeat whispered a promise. Humanity waited. They did not hunger for conquest, but they would never be unprepared. The storm was always there, sleeping in the shadows, ready to rise if ever called. Generations later, the galaxy still remembered. Tales were told to children under alien skies, of the dominion that thought itself eternal, of the warning that was ignored, and of the armadas that were shattered. Some spoke in fear, others in awe, but all agreed on one thing. Earth was not to be tested, and in the end, that was humanity's greatest victory. Not banners planted on foreign worlds, not crowns seized from broken kings, but respect carved deep into the memory of the stars. For the galaxy had learned its truth. Humanity did not conquer. Humanity endured. And those who ignored their warning paid the price in fire and silence. The story was complete. The lesson, eternal, and the galaxy would never forget.